I'm Paul Levinson, and welcome to Light On, Light Through, episode 89. First episode of Light On, Light Through in quite some time, but there was something I wanted to play for you. Now, those of you who have been loyal listeners of this podcast may recall that in episode 79 of Light On, Light Through, I played the longer than an hour interview that I did way back in 2006 when I drove up to Boston, Massachusetts on a beautiful late spring day, or maybe it was early summer, but it was beautiful in any case. And I was interviewed by Patrick Rands on his WZBC radio show. And you can still hear that interview up on Light Through. And as I said, it's episode 79. In any case, Patrick just a few days ago did another segment of my songs, not an interview, but a special 15-20 minute segment of some very interesting songs from various times in my career, ranging from Ring Around My Rosie, that Ed Fox and I produced, and you can hear me wailing in my falsetto near the end of that record, to Lime Streets, brand new song that I wrote slightly before the radio interview back in 2006 and sang live on Patrick's show. But the reason that Patrick did this show is there's a new version of Looking for Sunsets in the Early Morning that was written by Ed Fox and me, and it was recorded by two people, one of whom you may have heard of. Chances are you've heard of both of these people. One is Don Frankel, who will be familiar to you if you are a devotee of Twice Upon a Rhyme, my 1972 album, which was re-released by Whiplash Records on remastered vinyl a few years ago, and slightly before that as a CD by Beatball Records in South Korea. In any case, Don Frankel, or as we called him back then, Donnie Frankel, played organ and piano on that original recording of Looking for Sunsets in the Early Morning. Robbie Rist you may have heard of for another reason. He played Cousin Oliver on the Brady Bunch, and he has had a fabulous career in both music and movies, and for that matter, television as well. Well, obviously, the Brady Bunch was a television show, but Robbie Rist has appeared, for example, as the bus driver in Sharknado, the cult hit of just this past year. Anyway, Don and Robbie got together, created a group called Sundial Symphony, and recorded this great new version of Looking for Sunsets. So you'll hear that at the end of the set that Patrick put together and played on WZBC radio just a few days ago. Now, one other thing about this little broadcast, which actually, as far as I'm concerned, is a great big broadcast, you'll also hear at the beginning someone who has been talking to me about my science fiction for at least a decade. I ran into him at cons. I didn't even really know his name, but he is someone who is interested both in music and in science fiction. His name is Carl Thien, and he talks at the beginning of this podcast that you're going to hear in a few seconds about some of my science fiction novels, which is why I have entitled this podcast Science Fiction and Music. So enough my talking about it. Let's get right on to the podcast. Enjoy.
All right, you're listening to WZBC Newton, and right now we're going to be doing a special 15-minute spotlight on the music of Paul Levinson. And Paul Levinson's an interesting guy because Carl and I are into him for different reasons.
Yeah, Paul Levinson, to me, when the name first came up from Patrick talking about it, I was like, yeah, I love Paul Levinson. And he's like, yeah, you love him? Excellent. He starts talking. I'm like, huh? Paul Levinson is an author. He released 6 really awesome books that Well, it turns out that he also writes nonfiction books, but the ones that I'm a fan of are his fiction books. In 2000, he put out this book, The Silk Code, and it debuted this character called Phil D'Amato, and he was a New York Police Department forensic detective, and Silk Code is an amazing book, and it wasn't a sequel, but there was 2 more books with that character. There was The Pixel Eye and The Consciousness Plague, and between them was a book called Borrowed Tides. And recently he's done 2 books called The Plot to Save Socrates and a companion called Unburning Alexandria that just came out this summer. And all of those books are totally awesome, and I encourage you to look them up. Patrick's going to cover the music part, and we're both going to learn from that because, like I say, to me, he's just an amazing author.
And also an amazing songwriter, and for a lot of reasons, but the main one that really caught my attention was, what does this tell you right here, Carl?
Well, it's a iconic compilation series out of supposedly Japan. But
yeah.
Those kind of things, they're unlicensed. You never know where they're from. And it was a bubblegum compilation series that was huge, and everybody knows.
Called Bubblegum Mother. What? So Paul's song Ring Around My Rosie with the group Protozoa.
Mm-hmm.
One of the greatest bubblegum songs ever written and recorded. Would you believe it?
I would believe it, especially since his book, The Consciousness Plague, talks about a kind of like a germ that lives in all of us since mankind came. That
See, I knew there was a connection.
Yeah, that concerns memory. So I would totally believe it. And his first book, The Silk Code, talks about like Neanderthals living right now and like a subculture of Neanderthals. And it's not like huck, like, you know, it's this pretty neat thing. So I would believe that he would have a band called the Protozoas.
All right, so we're going to hear Paul Levinson's music right now here on WZBC.
Beautiful.
When I was just 4, I had a girl whose name was Rosie. Though I'm 4 no more, she's still the girl in my life. I like it that way, that's how it will stay. I love her so much, and that's why I say, I can't wait to put the ring around my Rosie. Gonna love her all my life. I can't wait to put the ring around my Rosie. Gonna take her for my wife. I can't wait to put the ring around my Rosie. We'll be like one. When we're older, we'll play ring around the Rosie, just like when we were young. We had so much fun. We always wanted to play house, and she'll be the one I'll pick for the rest of my life. And that's why I pray we'll marry someday. I love her so much, and that's why I say, I can't wait to put the ring around my Rosie. Gonna love her all my life. I can't wait to put the ring around my Rosie. Gonna take her for my wife. I can't wait to put the ring around my Rosie. We'll be like one. When we're older, we'll play ring around the Rosie, just like when we were young. Ring around the Rosie, ring around the Rosie, ring around the Rosie. I like to play house for real, and then I'll propose, and someday who knows, we may hear our son sing as he grows, sing as he grows. I can't wait to put the ring around the Rosie. Gonna love her all my life. I can't wait to put the ring around the Rosie. Gonna take her for my wife. I can't wait to put the ring around the Rosie. We'll be like one. When we're older, we'll play ring around the Rosie, just like when we were young.
clouds are crying. If a gentle breeze blows by for you, the earth is sighing. Your empty world seems so kind. Life's always hurting you, but life is just a state of mind. I'll change your point of view. I'll show you something new. Take a look at the world through love-colored glasses. You'll see blue where there once was gray. Take a look at the world through love-colored glasses, and the night will be bright as day. There are some who live for years without a glimpse of sunshine. They just can't see through their tears and never catch the punchline. You don't have to be like them. I'll clear your dreary gray skies. Make your world a sparkling gem. Just try these simple signs. Love into your eyes. Take a look at the world through love-colored glasses. You'll see blue where there once was gray. Take a look at the world through love-colored glasses, and the night will be bright as day. You'll see blue where there once was gray. Take a look at the world through love-colored glasses. Take a look at the world through love-colored glasses. Take a look at the world through
Things been getting worse lately. I've been loving in reverse lately. Almost time to say that I will. Seems from here the road is all downhill. Don't you believe it, girl? We're so still. Hey, we're not yet ready to say goodbye. You're gonna miss you. Won't get by. Goodbye don't make it. We can't forsake it. We're not yet ready to say goodbye. Well, life's been down on us lately. Been causing quite a fuss lately. Breaking up wouldn't be the same cure, but the treatment would be valuable. All the reasons never quite sure. Hey, we're not yet ready to say goodbye, so I'm gonna miss you. 'Cause we'll get by. Goodbye don't make it. We can't forsake it. We're not yet ready to say goodbye. Can't say so long. It's been so long. Can't say that's all. 'Cause that's all wrong. That's all wrong. Hey, we're not yet ready to say goodbye. No, I can't goodbye without you, baby. We can't forsake it. We're not yet ready to say goodbye. Goodbye. Say goodbye. Not yet ready to say
Skyscraper nestled in the quiet vapor of the clouds above the crowds that teem and dream below you. Skyscraper set against the pastel paper of the sky. I wish that I could see those colors glow too. Wonder what you see looking down at me. Wonder who I am. dressed up in the sparkling drapery of night. It's always bright outside for always new. Wonder what you see looking down at me. Wonder who I am. Wonder who I'll be. Skyscraper nestled in the quiet vapor of the clouds above the crowds that teem and dream below.
Lime streets, prime seats, start the show, take it slow. Plum parts, some hearts, got it made, unafraid. Days and dreams can both stay greenly. You can dodge the snow, fly in between. Lime streets, time beats, pay no mind, lift the blind. Blue views, you choose, in or out, win or doubt. Nights and stars can still shine clean. You can slide the rain, inscribe the scene. Lime street, time cheats, make your mark, shake the dark. Lime streets, prime seas, lime streets, time beats.
We wandered a wet and windy shore, washed by the morning hour, looking for last night's flower on the floor. We
All right, Sundial Symphony there with a new song. One old song, but a new version. Here on WZBC FM Newton. That was Looking for Sunsets, a Paul Levinson song that was actually also recorded by Protozoa, the band we started with at the top of that set. And we're featuring the music of Paul Levinson because that new Sundial Symphony song just came out this week, and that features Don Frankel and Robbie Rist. And we're looking forward to more music from Sundial Symphony. We also heard Paul Levinson in there himself live on WCBC from 2006 with Lime Street, Linda Kaplan with Skyscraper. And Linda Kaplan was a friend of Paul's and recorded a couple of demos for him back before she became a big marketing executive and came up with the Aflac Duck. We also heard a track from Paul's album with Ed Fox and Peter Rosenthal, Not Yet Ready to Say Goodbye. Mikie Harris and Paul Levinson before that with Love Colored Glasses. And Mikie Harris was married to Mike Rashkow, who discovered Paul's group just singing away in a park and put out a few records with them. And Mike Rashkow also worked with Ellie Greenwich on the Hardy Boys, something that Carl was really into growing up and I got into when I was into my bubblegum phase and still love to this day. Also before that, Donna Marie with Sunshine Mind, and we started off with one of the greatest bubblegum singles ever, Ring Around My Rosie from Protozoa, which can be found on the Bubblegum Mother compilation 3, or Tree as it says on the cover. So some great spotlight there on Paul Levinson, great songwriter, producer, and also writer, as we heard from Carl. With his new book out right now, Unburning Alexandria, came out this year. A lot of fascinating plots Carl was telling us about there. And one last thing, we also know that Boris Midney played on Paul's records before he became disco god in the late 70s. He was session musician, also doing jazz records. So pretty fascinating there. So hopefully you enjoyed that Paul Levinson Spotlight.
The Light on Light Through podcast.
Hey, Paul Levinson back here again. I want to thank Patrick and Carl for that wonderful segment. I really appreciate it. And by the way, I should mention that Sundial Symphony. Didn't that sound good? Several things I want to tell you about that. One, you can get that in its mastered version on iTunes and Amazon and all the usual places. Secondly, Donna and Robbie are recording a video, or actually making a video, of their performance of that song. I'll put that up on YouTube, and I'll include the link in this podcast on the Light On, Light Through page as soon as we have it. And also, Donnie and Robbie are recording some of my other songs as well. I think the next one they'll be recording is Today Is Just Like You. Ooh, today the sky is blue. Anyway, that's something that you might want to keep your ears peeled for. And last but not least, some of the science fiction novels that Carl was good enough to mention are now available in inexpensive Kindle editions on Amazon. The Silk Code, The Consciousness Plague, The Plot to Save Socrates, and Unburning Alexandria, my new 2013 novel. You can read more about that by going to this page, theplot2savesocrates.com, which has information about all my books in addition to The Plot to Save Socrates. And I'll make another promise, which I don't keep all that well. I know I've promised this in the past, but this time I promise twice over, with renewed enthusiasm, to be back here soon with another episode of Light On, Light Through. In the meantime, enjoy.